Hi class. So I want to do a quick video on graphics for this week, but even as I do this, I want to tell you that there's a lot of information in Chapter 8. They go through a lot of specifics, they give you a lot of tips and a lot of advice on how to create graphics, so I can't possibly cover everything here. The video would be far too long. So go back, take a look at the textbook as you're working through your work this week. It's really important and they do give you a lot of good information. But let's cover some of the most essential pieces and some of the things which I honestly just see a lot of students struggling with through different courses in the past. So first of all, an effective graphic has 5 characteristics. Let's look at some of these. First, it serves a purpose. This one's really essential. Each graphic that you use, you must know exactly what you're trying to do with it. You don't want to have a situation where the graphic is just clip art or where it's a stock photo or something that's not really doing anything more than just including a graphic for graphic's sake. So make sure that's serving a purpose, that's communicating information, that's supporting what you're writing, and that's going to be much more effective. It's simple and uncluttered and presents a manageable amount of information. These are really key because a lot of people don't know how to use complex graphics. So you want to use graphics that's going to clearly convey the message that you want to, and you don't want to try and include too much data in it because again, it's probably going to confuse people and you want to try and make your point with the graphics. So the more that you can do to make it simple, to really just focus on the information that you need to. Sometimes this means you can't include every single piece of information in your graphic. You can't include like 100 years or huge amounts of data. You need to really focus in on what's the key data and what do you actually need to present there. It meets readers' format expectations. This one's important just in terms of knowing what the conventions of different graphic styles are. So the textbook uses the example of flowcharts where diamonds are used for decision points, but there's a lot of other format kind of conventions, and just following those are really important. And then finally, clearly labeling all of your graphics. This means giving a title, giving axes labels, making sure that the numbers are really clear throughout. You never want to have a situation where the graphics that you're using don't really give the information or are less clear than they need to be. Okay, so when creating graphics, I'd really suggest making sure that you're following all 3 major steps. The book presents this in a slightly different way, but they're basically still the same essential steps. Make sure that you plan the graphic, that you design it effectively, and that you integrate it effectively. And each of these steps sometimes have some areas where students have messed up a little bit in the past and had some issues. So let's talk about planning graphics first. When you plan graphics, make sure that you're really paying attention to your audience and your purpose. Know who you're writing for, what types of graphics they're familiar with, what types of graphics are going to convey the information that they need, how they're going to be using your document. So you just need to really pay attention to who they are and what they know and how they're going to use the document, because if you don't, they might have some problems in using it and you don't want the graphics to cause problems. With the purpose, again, this is just coming down to like, what's the point that you're trying to make? How can you display that visually? What kind of information are you trying to convey? Are you conveying numerical information, process information, spatial information? We're going to get into this a little bit later, but knowing all those different things helps you kind of choose some of the graphics beforehand, or choose the graphic types beforehand so that you can design them effectively. And then there's also other constraints just to know, like physical constraints. If they're using it in low light situations, or if they need to be able to view that graphic from across the room on a poster, it's going to change how you're going to design it, how much time and money you have to develop it, etc. When you are actually designing your graphics, there's a few just basic things to pay attention to. Choosing the right form. So in order to choose the right form, you're going to want to know what type of information you're presenting and then select the right type of graphic to present that information. And there's a lot of information again in your textbook on this. I think it's on page 211, 212. I'll come back to it later in these slides. But also include all relevant data, so you don't want to just include partial data. This is kind of an ethical thing. If you only include partial data, you might be skewing what the graphic seems to present. Beginning axes at 0, this is essential just because that again can skew things and make it seem like there's bigger changes than there are. Citing sources, if you're ever using information from another source, make sure to cite it, and using color consistently. I want to talk about color real quickly here. So, contrast is a big concept in graphic design. And it's really about how do you make things stand out. So you need to have strong contrast between colors if you want to put them next to each other. If you want to put text on top of other text, if you want to put one bar next to another bar in a bar graph, you need to make sure that these things are clearly delineated. So this one just kind of shows you an example, again from your textbook, of what might happen if you have text that's too similar to the color of the background as compared to text that is very different from the color of the background. Contrast is absolutely essential. Make sure that you're creating strong contrast between your different elements. But you can also use color to create patterns. I love this image from the textbook because I think it can really help us see how these patterns are used consistently. So you can see all of these different colors across all of these different drawings here and know that they're referencing the same parts of this, system. So with that in mind, you're also going to want to use color consistently in your own graphics. So when you're creating graphics for the current project, make sure that the graphics throughout the entire project all look like they're created through the same thought process, that they're created consistently. You don't want like one graphic to use yellow and green and another graphic to use blue and red without any explanation of why they're changing that color pattern. Choosing the appropriate graphic depends on the information being illustrated. So there are a lot of different types of information: numerical information, logical relationships, process, and visual and spatial. And I'd really suggest that the information on pages 211 and 212 can help you decide what type of graphic to use. They're going to give you examples of like what is your purpose, and then how you go about taking that purpose and turning it into a specific graphic. So those pages are great, I think, in supporting you in that. So let's take a quick look at an example, because once you get to the actual point of designing a graphic, you're just going to need to know how to use the software a little bit more. Now, I hope you all have already used Word and Excel. I'm going to show it to you in Word. Typically, I create most of my graphics in Excel because I find it's a little bit more user-friendly, and then I move them over to Word after I've created them, but I'm just going to show it to you in Word first. Just a second. So I just wanted to make sure that you could see the menu which I have up at top, so you can see that as I click on it. So in this case, I'm going to be trying to make a graphic that shows that cell phone ownership has remained relatively consistent over the past 5 years, but smartphone ownership has increased dramatically. And I'll be using information that I'm finding from the Pew Research Center, so we can go ahead and see what their information is here. But in order to do this, I'm going to first have to go into Word and create a graphic directly. So if you go into Word, you're going to find it under this chart thing. So under the Insert menu and then Chart. And then you're going to want to choose a type of graphic. Now you can do this in different orders, but if you haven't done it before, this is a fine way to do it. Since I want to do something over time, a line graph is an effective way to show changes over time. So that will open up this, and then I just need to start filling in information and knowing what I'm trying to show. So in this case, these categories for my information is going to be the different years. I'm going to simplify this data a lot so that we can just look at years specifically. So let's go ahead and just fill in the years, and I'll pause the video as I fill in some of this. Okay, now I'm back and I've filled in all of this information. In this case, because the data that I was pulling off of was in percentages, I've entered everything in percentages. I entered all the years and then all of the data for both cell phone and smartphone in those percentages down there that I found. So after you're done with that, you have a line chart that looks like this. So we can see that the cell phone line is up here and that it's consistent, though it's high. And that we see the smartphone line, on the other hand, steadily increasing over time. So there's a number of different things that we can do at this point. We're going to want to give the chart a descriptive title, something like cell phone versus smartphone ownership over the past 5 years. We'll want to go ahead and go in here and add axis titles because it's important to do that. So we might want to just put down years down here, and then up on the side do something like percentage ownership, which could probably be better, but I'm just doing this off the top of my head. So you can start seeing how this was going to be coming together. Our final step, going back to this, is to also consider integrating the graphic with the text. And so it says place it in an appropriate location, introduce the graphic in the text, explain the graphic in the text, make it clearly visible, and make it accessible. So the main concerns that we're going to look about here is making sure that we have the graphic clearly integrated into here. So we have it in the right location, that's next here, but we don't ever have it labeled or mentioned in here. So maybe we actually want to get rid of this title and then just add a little label underneath it, like figure 1 cell phone versus smartphone ownership. Over the past 5 years. And then we can say, we can just put it directly into here. As shown in figure 1, cell phone ownership has remained relatively constant over the past 5 years, while smartphone ownership has increased consistently. So we can start doing things like that. And whenever you include a figure in a document like this, you're going to want to mention it specifically and directly in the text itself, and make sure that's integrated so that when people see the graphic and see it next to it, they can quickly conceptualize how it's related to everything. So that brings us to the end of what I wanted to cover. Sorry the video went on quite so long, but hopefully it's useful, and do send me any questions that you have over the week.